feeling like that slow motion going on, like getting a little bit more control of that. I was spitting blood. I had a hole in my mouth. Shrapnel had gone through and taken out one of my teeth. And I didn't realize that also a piece of shrapnel went through my neck, and it went through my carotid artery into my trachea and my esophagus. And, I was able to get some pictures of it a few years later, and like I could see that. I think it was cauterized because it was so close that I didn't bleed out.
Welcome to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and today my guest is Kanaan Merriken, a fellow New Mexico boy, just like myself. You don't see a lot of us in the 75th in the Army. It's rare that I run into somebody else from New Mexico, so that's something that builds on the bond that Kanaan and I have had, as we're from the same place. So when we're talking about the barrios of Albuquerque, we all know where we're talking about. Kanaan has a great story. I've known Kanaan for years in and around the 75th, and we were fortunate enough to serve together as first sergeants in 3rd Ranger Battalion. We had a great crew of first sergeants down there. We were a really tight-knit group, and I got to know him a little bit better. I got to know his story a little bit more, and he's gracious enough to come on here and share a little bit about it, because it's a crazy story, right?
Yeah.
It's got a lot to it. I'll hand it over to Kanaan to introduce himself, and we'll get into the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Kanaan Merriken, been in the Army for about 22 years. Grew up in Albuquerque, and I joined the Army in 1999. That in itself is interesting and unique, and I'm kind of glad I did it. And there's a lot of things that I've learned in the military that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. And it might be the structure of it. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, so, and then me and my wife, we got married in 2003. We have 2 kids now, and now here I am 22 plus years, I guess, later, or almost 22 years.
Yeah, and then when Kanaan says that, he makes that sound pretty easy, like it was a seamless 22 years, which I assure you was not, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So when we were talking a little bit off camera, you said, I didn't know before, but your dad was in the Army too. Yeah. What did he do in service?
He was he was kind of a troublemaker as a kid, and so my grandpa, I think, brought him back from one of the times he had ran away and said, "You're either going to go join the Army, or you're going to get drafted, or you're going to go to jail, or one of those 3 things." And so my dad enlisted at the age of 17 or 18, and he went and was in Vietnam with the 101st.
Infantryman?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
He was a mortarman.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So it's, did you talk much about his service and his time in Vietnam before you came in, or before you thought about joining the Army, or as a kid?
Not very much. We talked a little bit about he definitely had some problems.
Yeah.
He was greatly affected from Agent Orange. And he had a lot of things that happened to him in the war or in Vietnam, and then that affected him when he got out. That was not one of his favorite topics.
Yeah, that's probably. I mean, up until recently, and I think still there, the stigma with mental health and getting help was there, man. And the self-medicating and all that stuff. So hopefully through some of this, we can not only help our generation, but maybe even the previous generation that didn't get the help when they needed it. So join the Army. Mm-hmm. Joined the Ranger Regiment. Did you know what you're getting into? Did you have a Option 40 contract when you went to the recruiter?
So I didn't know what that meant. One of my close friends was serving in the Ranger Regiment, and he told me about it. I mean, he'd come home on leave and walk us through like airborne timelines and stuff like this, like things that are just super rare to a civilian. So we're like sitting on the sidewalk, and he's like giving us the countdown to standing up and hooking up and like jumping out of the door, and this 18-year-old kid, I'm like, this is super fun, and so when I went to the recruiter, I was like, well, I just want to do what Rangers do, and so he didn't have to recruit much, and it was he's like, well, just take the ASVAB test and if you pass the score and you're good enough, then you'll be fine. And so it ended up working out.
You and I were both pre 9/11 guys, which is, I'm 9 months pre 9/11. You're, over a year pre 9/11. We're close to the anniversary, the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. What did 9/11? How did that impact you? Were you in 375 at the time that happened? What was that like for you?
Wow, that was intense for me. I was a private, still kind of doing the private activities pre 9/11, and so I think I had just come off staff duty.
Oh, really?
The night before, not even the night before, the morning of, and I was walking back to my room, and someone was running up to the BCO barracks, or the BCO offices. And he said, "Hey, a plane just flew into the World Trade Center," and I was like, I just didn't believe him. I was like, "There's no way." And so I went. I didn't have a TV, so I went to my one of my Ranger buddies' rooms and on the news, and I watched the second plane fly into the World Trade Center, and I was just like dumbfounded. And I'm like, no idea what that meant. It was super interesting. I mean, it was just
Yeah, I think it's hard to explain it was so bizarre. And I mean, for me, it was just, I was in the barracks as well. And I was watching it happen. I was like, this is kind of why I joined the Army. However, this is terrible, right? Like the price of this. And then, I mean, the last 20 years have been, crazy since 9/11. Let's get your deployments the first thing. So there's no other way to say this, right? Kanaan was dead basically from a IED blast overseas.
Yeah, it was in Iraq in 2003.
Yeah, and basically now he's not dead, obviously, because he set me on the podcast. So let's talk about that story a little bit and what led up to it and that deployment.
Yeah. So I'll just start from the date. So on June 26, 2003. We had been in country for 5 days, and for me that was my fourth deployment. I'd been in the invasion of Afghanistan. Then we went back to Afghanistan, I think 6 months after that, and then we invaded Iraq, and we had come back from the Iraq invasion, and then we got surged back, and so it had been maybe 6 weeks since we'd returned from our initial deployment, and then we were back overseas, and so it was our first mission. There was like a family that had been under question to find out where Saddam Hussein was located. We hadn't found him at that point, and they didn't know. So my squad pretty much got assigned to take them out to the green zone, and we were in Baghdad International Airport. And so it's maybe 2 miles, maybe 2 or 3 miles to the green zone.
Were you a team leader or squad leader at the time, or?
Well, I was a medic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was a unique period in the Ranger Regiment where we would have infantry medics who'd gone to EMT, do medical stuff, and so I worked in the 8 cage. I was a medic for my platoon. I was assigned to work 2 squads while the primary medic was like responsible for all the squads, really
plugging a hole where we needed some help.
And so even during the invasion of Iraq, I was a medic. I didn't have like a duty position, so I was kind of running back and forth helping guys out. And anyway, so I was just the medic on the vehicle, and so I was they're like, hey, you drive this Suburban, and then another team leader, Sergeant Rocha, was to drive the other Suburban, and then there'd be a GMV up front and a GMV behind us, and so we'd just take these vehicles out. So we drove them out, dropped the families off, and we didn't really plan properly because we didn't have the right seating for the return trip. And so I just hopped on top of the Humvee and sat next to where the gunner's at, and so I was holding on to the turret with my left hand because I had my rifle in my right, and so I was like reaching back like this and just kind of like watching the traffic as we were passing it, and then boom, there it goes. And so the best way to describe that feeling is in Saving Private Ryan when he's like at the bridge towards the end of the movie and everything gets like super slow.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened. And I was just like, it was just very foggy, and I was like, my ears were numb, nothing, I couldn't hear what's going on. And it took a few times for me to process that. One of my my ranger buddies was asking me, he's like, hey, are you okay? Are you all right? Are you all right? And I didn't know he was also severely wounded. I think our vehicle had 11 people in it, and 9 people got injured to a different degree, and then 2 people died. One died immediately, and one died 2 days later.
So the IED was IED or
it was
VBAC?
IED.
Yeah, IED. Everything you coming out of that, you got medevaced to the cache there in Bio?
So it was about 45 minutes before I was personally seen by a medical provider, and I had so about 2 months ago, our senior medic, Colonel Knight, he's like, hey, I have your medical casualty card from when you got injured, and I was a medic at the time, so I kind of knew what he was talking about, and I was like, oh, really interesting. Like
You hadn't seen it before.
I hadn't seen it before. And on it, there's like the AVPU, which is it's like a check that medics would do, at least back then, to check if you're alert to alert, or if you're alert to verbal or pain, or if you're unresponsive. And so, and then it also checks like my what my vitals are, and all my vitals were at 0, and so no heart rate, nothing like that. And then I was, but I was responsive, and then 15 minutes later I was unresponsive, and so that was kind of, I guess, the part where I was out for a few minutes.
That's insane. So when you got back, what do you know? 'Cause I don't know if you remember the process to when you first got treated there. What's the first thing you remember post? What's the first thing you remember after everything happened?
Well, I mean, I was in medically induced coma for 11 days, and so like the time from the blast until the time I got recovered, I have like snippets of memory of what was going on. Like I can remember getting up, unbuckling my chin strap, and feeling like that slow motion going on, like getting a little bit more control of that. I was spitting blood. I had a hole in my mouth that shrapnel had gone through and taken out one of my teeth, and I didn't realize that also a piece of shrapnel went through my neck, and it went through my carotid artery into my trachea and my esophagus. And I was able to get some pictures of it a few years later, and like I could see that. I think it was cauterized because it was so close that I didn't bleed out. And when I unstrapped my helmet, my head was hurting. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I didn't realize I had a hole the size of a decent sized rock inside my head. And so I mean, the hole was about that inside my head, and the mushroom of the Kevlar in my helmet was ballooned out, and so it was like putting pressure on my head.
Oh yeah. And
so that's why I unsnapped my helmet, and I was like, oh man, I felt relief after that, because it just felt like I was just compact. And I got up and was doing a few things, and then I got into the QRF vehicle, and that's when
you got up like post blast and were doing a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you were. Right. Well, hole in your face, hole in your neck, and you're up at doing things. Cause I'm amazed by people of this community every day. So you're doing things. When did somebody hey, we might need to treat you?
Yeah, I don't know how. I don't know exactly what the process was. I think I was very, you fall back to like your training, and so because I was a medic, I don't know if I was doing, like, I know I wasn't doing medical treatment per se, but I might have been like checking to see if the guys that were still alert are doing okay. Like, hey, is there something I can do for you? Are you all right? Or even at the same time, they're probably asking me the same thing.
Right.
Like, you don't look good, bro. And I'm like, well, I don't have a mirror, so I guess we'll go.
Just keep going. Thank God he didn't have a mirror. Oh, that's crazy. So you evac, did you go unconscious at some point while you're out at the blast site?
So yeah, right when I got into the recovery vehicle, the gunner asked me. He was pretty severely injured as well, and he said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I said, "I don't think I'm okay anymore," And I think that's when I passed out.
Oh.
And I had a lot of surgeries happen right there in Baghdad, and this is June of 2003, so everything was very rudimentary. And I mean, the doctors weren't. They knew what they were doing because I'm still here. So that was pretty amazing. And
yeah, I'm amazed at what the medical capability has. I mean, even in 2003, it was pretty good in that compared to what it is
definitely.
now. So you get 11 days in the coma. Was that in Baghdad?
So I spent 2 days in Baghdad, surgery, and then enough recovery where they felt comfortable to move us, and that's when Sergeant Conway died. We both were about the same rating as to what our health levels were.
Yeah.
They actually had thought I was. They thought that I was worse off than I was, and they thought Tim was better off than he was, and that's a sad thing. Not that I would,
Yeah, it's just
it was just the luck of the draw almost, and I think somewhere along the time when they were moving our bodies to Exville or to get on the medevac to Germany, I think is when he just stopped working, and I didn't. So.
Yeah. It's things happen for a reason.
Yeah,
they do. They really do. So back to Germany. For how long were you in Germany?
I was in Germany for a week, and I was, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, spending 22 years roughly in or about with the Ranger Regiment, the way that they take care of their people.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom and my wife were in Germany with me for the whole time almost.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I didn't know if you were married at the time.
Yeah, we'd gotten married about 6 weeks before I got injured.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Welcome to the Army life.
Yeah. She's like answering phone calls. Your husband's about to die. Do you want to retire him? And she's like,
Oh my gosh. Next time you have an FRG problem, relate it to this story and realize it's nothing. So your family got to come to Germany.
Yeah.
You were there, and then eventually moved back stateside and went through the rehab, and eventually you got medically discharged from the Army, right? Can you talk about that?
So I got medically retired the day after the actual injury, and
Really?
I don't know. I mean, maybe I could do some research on what what the process was back then. But I think from what I understand, it was if I didn't get medically retired before I died, then it would affect my wife's
Oh yeah, that's interesting. We were learning a lot about that process back then as a unit, as a DOD in general, and there were a lot of casualties coming around at those times with the IED. So they pretty much thought you were imminent.
Right. So I was in like a 72-hour imminent. It was called imminent death processing, and that was where the window to retire me or not. So it was very it was just fixed. It was
That's crazy.
I couldn't go around it.
So when you came back stateside, where did you end up going?
So I went to Walter Reed, and I was there for from I think early July till the last day of July, I think is when I left Walter Reed and went down to James Haley down in Tampa Bay for the TBI clinic down there.
Yeah. So when you got to Walter Reed, I mean, you made it back to Germany. You're making it longer than anybody's anticipating you to make it, right? And what were the doctors like? Do you remember much of the Walter Reed experience? Were they they couldn't believe where you are and the progress you were making that early on, or what was the feeling still?
I would say I don't remember how the doctors felt. I was lucky to have one of my he was my platoon sergeant for 3 years, and I've been in the Army for 3.5.
Yeah.
And so he was really close to me, and he was the HRC LNO for the Ranger Regiment. He worked in Alexandria before they moved to Fort Knox, and so I had him there, and he would come and visit a lot, and that was pretty awesome. And then also one of my PLs in a short period of time had gotten out of the Army just like recently, and he lived in Washington, D.C. So I had like close relationships.
Yeah.
And then another interesting story, General Lemoyne was one of my really close friends from high school. His dad's battalion or brigade commander when he was a battalion commander.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had like these really close connections with people in that area that helped. Like they made everything seem like normal to me, I guess.
You had a little support group there.
Yeah, I did.
And Ranger buddies and beyond that, really. That's value of community, I think, is understated sometimes, and then having somebody there. Walter Reed to Tampa. Can you try to talk that whole, because you ended up going back to New Mexico for a bit, is that right?
Yeah. So there's a few things that like I want to bring up about that were super important that I only know more about them as I get older, or just like gain more experience and knowledge. I mean, it's like, wow, you're lucky that it worked out well for you, because you could have easily lost that. And that's relationships. Relationship building is critical in everything, and I learned that through what happened almost immediately after I had come back to Columbus, Georgia, and was without a job. I was out of the Army. I had no sense of I would say purpose, but almost like I didn't even know what that was.
Right.
It was so immediate. Like one day I'm in the Army, boom, the next day I'm not.
Right.
And I'd slept throughout like that whole transition period, so I didn't even know.
You didn't get a transition.
No, I had nothing. And then so everything was weird. Yeah, I was just like, well, I mean, I guess I don't have to wake up and shave,
Yeah.
Just sleep in. But what really happened though is I'll take it back a second. So when I left Walter Reed and went down to James A. Haley, they were very adamant that I was supposed to be there for a year to recover, but they didn't know either. I mean, like you said, it was kind of new to TBIs aren't new, but how I was being treated didn't help. But I'm very like
our education of TBIs was very new at that point.
Yeah, and so I didn't let them take control.
Right. And
so that was probably, I don't know. I mean, in the long term, I guess it worked out well for me. But if I would have stayed longer, I don't know what it would have been like. But I definitely did not like it. I did not like being controlled that way.
Yeah.
And so, I just told them I don't want to be here, and they just had to end up letting me go. And so, went back to Columbus, Georgia, and the last thing the doctor told me before I left is like, hey, 60 days, you can't do anything. And so there's like a little bit more to the story so when I was getting my surgery in Baghdad, they had removed about hand size amount of my skull. And so I didn't have a skull there. It was just like, flesh and brain. And I didn't have as they call it, a craniotomy, but they didn't put like the replacement skull in until like 10 or 11 months later.
Oh, wow.
And so I was, it's like, I had to be super careful about everything I did.
That's an understatement, I think. Yeah.
So I went from like, imagine the life of a Ranger private. What was the thing we did?
Oh, yeah.
We worked and partied hard.
Yeah.
And everything was that, like, to the extreme. That's kind of what we did. And all of a sudden, like, all of that was gone.
Yeah, you went from 100 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour in an instant for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And so when I was talking about building relationships, I had a good relationship with the Ranger Regiment still, and they looked out for me, and I was able to get a job. Like I said, 60 days after I came back, I went to my first job.
Was that here in Columbus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I worked at the Wexford Group International, which is
very familiar.
Now they work with CACI, but or CACI, I guess, however you want to read it, and worked there. I mean, I don't even know if I had a job, like, but the people that worked there like brought me in and helped me like kind of like break through this, like the transition that happened so immediate.
Yeah.
And that was really, really helpful. And I worked there for about 9 months because me and my wife had been married right before I got injured. We wanted to have a better wedding.
Yeah.
And so instead of the courthouse one that we did the year before, we had like
and so many of us are friends. Yeah.
a real deal wedding. And
I think she had earned it at that point. Right?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I should give her another one.
Yeah, probably.
she's probably earned a few more of those.
Yeah.
But and it's, my dad had, been given like the, terminal note from the doctors right around that time. And so this is 2004, and he's like, hey, or he didn't really tell me, but, he's like, I'm kind of on my last leg. So we decided, me and Carrie, to move back to New Mexico. And I didn't owe anything. I was getting, disability, 100% disability from the VA. And so we moved back to New Mexico. We bought a house in Albuquerque, and just didn't have anything to do, so just bullshit.
That's so you got back to Albuquerque, and the crazy part about all this is you go from the hole in your neck to hole in your face, hole in your head, literally, and now you're back in the Ranger Regiment and served in every duty position through first sergeant. Okay, how did that come about, coming back? I mean, 100% disability to back to where you are now is I mean, that's a phenomenal, amazing feat. How'd that happen?
Well, one thing, and I think any Ranger that listens to this will agree, but like it's just when you say you can't do something to a Ranger, it only like fuels the fire.
Right.
And it's like, well, you say that, but if I show you how I can do it, and then I do it, then you lost your vote in that thing. And I think that's just like how I've kind of lived everything. You just like, you can't tell me no. And it's been challenging, and as we'll probably talk a little bit more about some more challenging things that have happened in my life. But I remember I did an interview with the Veterans Affairs in Albuquerque. And I don't know what they were doing, but they were tied in with one of the local colleges, and it might have been like a thing for a degree that somebody was doing. But it was an interview, and they had like a professional VA I don't know, like advocate there.
Oh yeah.
And she was asking questions, and she was the one who said like, no, that's impossible. You're 100% disabled. You can't go back to the Army. And I'm like, I don't understand it. Like, it didn't process in my brain. Like, what makes something 100% impossible?
Right.
And I'm like, even to me now, I still can't picture what that means. Like,
right.
The only thing that makes things impossible is someone not wanting to try to
right.
do it. And like, how much effort can you put forth? And that, it helped me out, because I would say probably if I tried to do that again, I wouldn't be successful. I wouldn't have been accepted back into the Army.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a reference I use a lot at work. It's a 3-foot wall. I mean, you can either have 3-foot walls stop you and change you, or you can go over them or break through them. And yeah, you're a prime example of breaking through those walls and coming back into the organization. What did your wife think about you coming back after all she had been through?
I think one of the biggest strengths that my wife has is she is very good at understanding me more than I am.
They have a tendency to do that.
Because I'm like, I mean, we were in the 2003, 2004 was really like, I mean, the war was really stepping up in Afghanistan, in Iraq. I mean, I'd lost a couple more Ranger buddies. One had gotten out of the Army and then went over as a contractor, and he died he got shot while he was driving a vehicle. And then another guy, he blew up. He didn't blow himself up. Sorry, he was in the ready room, and he had one of his incendiary devices go off, and it ended up killing him. And then the normal battle fatigue, or people dying in battle, like it was just there and apparent. And I'm like, I'm fully capable. I'd kind of gotten back into physical fitness. My friend Travis, that was in Ranger Regiment at the time, he had gotten out of the Army, and we were hanging out a lot in Albuquerque, and we were doing we did like the Baton Death March together.
Yeah. Down at White Sands?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so like I was ready to come back into the Army. And so I went to a recruiter and they were like, well, you have to get cleared by a neurologist because of your injuries. And so I had set it up and we'd driven down to Fort Bliss, Texas, and went to see the neurologist, and it was one of the brain surgeons that had actually done surgery in Baghdad on me. And so he was surprised because I guess as normal as one can be, but at that time, and like my tests were kind of almost cartoony.
Yeah.
And I did a CAT scan or a PET scan on my brain, and there's a little bit of dead space up there, but it was.
I can vouch for that.
It was still pretty good to keep going. And so they, he wrote me off, and I had to pretty much give up my disability pay and come back into the Army as an E4.
Yeah.
And came to Fort Benning. They couldn't assign me to special operations. They could only assign me to a location. And so showed up to Fort Benning and went and talked to the it's now RSTC, their selection and training company, but then it was the ROC.
The ROC, I think,
where they have the RASP, or at that point it was RIP and ROPE. And we talked to their commandant, and he ended up being my first sergeant when I got injured. Now he's the first sergeant of here. And so like this, it's almost like all the stars aligned. And the regimental sergeant major's like, yeah, he can come back to the Ranger Regiment, but he has to pass RIP.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, it kind of hurt me. It hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm. I had to do the same.
But you just think about it, and you're like, at the time, it's horrible because you're like, how am I not being treated with some sort of like, white glove?
Right.
You're just not. You're just like everyone else, and that's like the most real thing that it can be. And I feel like I have a little bit of resentment towards that decision, but the more separate I get from that time, the more I'm like, I'm almost more thankful that it happened, because I realize the standards are for everyone and they're not special for individuals.
Yeah, so I've known you for a while. I'm learning so much about you. You came back, like the fact that you run into your surgeon, you run into your, you're running into everybody through this phase that got you. You were meant to come back. That's just, things happen for a reason. The timing couldn't have been better. I got out of the Army as well in 2004 and got recalled back in, and was fortunate enough to find myself back in the regiment because the Army needed people at that point, right? They were bringing everybody in. Didn't matter if you had a hole in your head or not. They were bringing you back. And I remember from my wife, we weren't married at the time, but she just knew how miserable I was outside of the Army, watching everybody go over and watching everything that happened. And I knew, like, I can still contribute. And I walked away before I was ready to walk away. So, our wives are a big part of this whole process, and we can't thank them enough. That's a lot. That's a lot of, that story alone is we could talk for hours and how you got to there. And I super appreciate you sharing that. I know it's not easy going back down some of those roads. Let's move on a little bit. We've kind of done it already. I'll ask you though anyway, because I ask everybody, what's your definition of vulnerability?
Well, when you brought it up earlier, I was like driving up here to do this, but I think there's more to that. There's of course more to it. Being in the public about stuff. I was going through some of these questions in my head, like, what does it mean to be vulnerable? And I think one of the things that was the most apparent to me is the feeling of failure, not really failure itself. Yeah. Because like the feeling of failure is because you feel like you let somebody down, or you let a team down, or you let your wife down. Yeah. You didn't follow through with what you were, what you set yourself out to do. So I think that would be a form of vulnerability that I would say is more challenging for me to get past. But the farther I get from my injury, I'm very, very reluctant to open up about let me take this back. I have no issue talking about my injury and all that stuff, but I feel like I'm reluctant to like move past it, and so vulnerability is like just getting out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, I think so. Vulnerability, I think, has a lot of definitions. I get a different one from everybody that comes in here, and you're right. Like moving on, right, from some of that stuff because it's hard, right? Everything has gone on in the last month in Afghanistan, and trying to process and move on from that is, I mean, that's, you got to be vulnerable with yourself to do it. So I just like everybody's got a different perspective, and I don't think any of it's wrong, you know. And so let's talk about your family a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. You've had to go through some trials and tribulations there, right? And your wife, and God bless her, and all the deployments you've gone through, and you have 2 kids that are in special needs that, you know, are. There's a lot of work that has to go into maintaining your family. If you could just speak on it a little bit.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I don't even know where we would start. So my son's 13, and he's got, well, both my son and my daughter have spinal muscular atrophy, which is a neurodegenerative genetic disease, and it's 1 out of 40 people carry the gene, and so both my wife and me were carrying the gene. So it's like 1 in 6,000 kids are born with this disease, and so it's like a rare, common disease type of thing.
Right.
And so when Caleb was probably a year to a year and a half years of age, you know, my wife started seeing things that didn't fit, like he wasn't growing right, or he wasn't eating, and we found out it wasn't SMA really specifically at the point, but that's when we found out that SMA was there, but he had like digestion issues. He wasn't able to, he had to like get and what do they call it? We call it a nose hose, but nasopharyngeal.
Oh yeah.
Nasopharyngeal, there it is. And so it'd go up his nose into his stomach, and that's how we would feed him for a while. And then through all that, we started taking him in to get tests to find out what else was going on. And it was like, hey, it all came back when he was about 2 years old. He had spinal muscular atrophy, and he was type 2. And so he's been unable to walk, and so he's in a wheelchair. He's a power wheelchair, and same level of intelligence, smart wise, as any other 13-year-old boy. But he definitely like has grown up with this, and so that has been very challenging. And then, you know, to bring into the conversation my wife, and I think it was 2011 or 12, we started it's called the SMA 5K, and it was really my wife and her close friend and family that put this thing together. But every year we would do a 5K run, and we were able to raise about $120,000 over 4 years, and we donated that to Cure SMA. And now, when my wife was pregnant with my daughter, we were able to find out halfway through that Harper was going to have SMA as well. And so when Harper was born, we went down to Orlando. Carrie had applied for a project, or it's not a project, it's a trial through Biogen, which is the drug company, to get this treatment that
for Harper.
For Harper.
Okay.
And so Harper got into this treatment at like 3 weeks old. And so she'll be 6 in 2 weeks, and she's like almost acts like a normal child. She can run around, play, hop, and do all those other things.
Yeah.
And just every 4 months, my wife takes her down to Orlando to get her medical treatment. And then at the same time we were getting Harper into it, we were trying to get Caleb into it, but he had scoliosis to a point where they wouldn't accept him because the degree in his back was too much. And so we had to get a back surgery. So he had his first back surgery, and his orthopedic surgeon set it up where the rods were on his ribs and his pelvis, and so it kind of gave his back like kind of free rein for his procedure. And the procedure is a lumbar puncture into like the lower spine, and it pulls out a little bit of spinal fluid, and then puts in the drug to do whatever it does. So science, and then
Let's not get into science, me and you.
let's not get too far into that. Anyway, so he was declined from the trial, and so we got him a back surgery. He healed up enough from that. Then we started him on his drug because I think I'm missing steps here, which I am. I had to get cleared through the FDA.
Oh, wow.
And like there's all kinds of stuff that happened. Finally, it did get cleared through the FDA, and then we were able to do that process. But I think we had to do the back surgery to get his scoliosis right.
Oh, yeah.
Before, and I think I might have the timing off on it, but I do have a TBI, so
Yeah, you're forgiven.
yeah. I don't know how that happened.
So he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Right. How many surgeries has he had?
So he's had 2 back surgeries, and the surgeries are intense. Like I don't know. I mean, a back surgery is a back surgery.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine, but I just know the tending to him recovery wise. I mean, it's it's super challenging. I mean, it's hard.
It's got to be hard as a dad.
Yeah.
Having to, seeing your son in pain. And can't do things, and I can't even imagine. And then during all these 13 years that you've been deploying.
Yeah.
And your wife's been holding down the fort.
Yeah,
she's
been crushing it.
I mean, share a little bit about your wife and.
Yeah. So I'll take it to the beginning because it matters and it counts. But we met in August of 2001, and so we'd known each other very briefly, and then 9/11 happens, and then it was just like it just kickstarted like everything. We were dating for about another year and a half before we ended up getting married. And so when I came back from our 3rd deployment, we decided to tie the knot. And then I kind of already talked about what happened 6 weeks later. So it was really like shock to her. But, I've kind of like opened up about how I want. I think one of the things I said to her when we first got married is, I'm never going to stop dipping. I'm never going to stop drinking. I'm never going to stop being a ranger.
You're right.
I think that was like our prenup. And so I have slightly stopped dipping.
Yeah. It's ebbs and flows in judgment. Yeah.
Slightly stopped drinking. We'll see when it comes to about 5 o'clock tonight. But I haven't stopped being a ranger. And now I think I'm starting to feel the aches and pains of doing it for all these years. And anyways, we're talking about Carrie. So anyways, we get married and we were together, and then she's just been holding on the whole time. And I want to go to war. I want to go to war. I was like, I don't really want to go to war. I just want to go be with like all my,
be with my friends.
Be with all my friends.
Yeah. And she's held it down back here and raised the 2 kids that have the medical issues. And it's, and dealing with you on a daily basis, I know what that can be like.
I'm like the 3rd kid.
You're absolutely right. So let's talk a little bit about mental health. And you kind of you kind of caveated into it there. It's a challenge for all of us, I think, that have been through what we've done the last 20 years and some of the stigma around it. And I think it's super important. We've both kind of been open with each other about our journey into it over the past couple of years. What are your thoughts on it? Just
well, one, I didn't even think of it the way that you brought it up when I was talking about my dad. Like, I didn't even think of it.
Yeah.
But he probably would have done a lot better if he would have had a little bit of help. Because he was, I think even just generationally, the Vietnam War and those that fought in it did not have the same perception that the American soldiers or Marines, Navy, whatever, all that we have now, like they just didn't have it. And so there's that, and then not to get into politics of war or anything, but there's just things that probably happened in Vietnam that went against people's view on things, and it really did affect them. And I would say that the force has come a long way since then. I know we have like the what is it, POTIF?
Yeah, preservation of force and families.
Yeah, preservation of the force and families, and we do. And in special operations, it's treated with you know, a lot of respect, dignity, and it's very important. And they've set these things up, like the psychologists.
Yeah, putting the psychologists in the
social
units,
workers, people to help work through
trying to
the
make it
problem.
more accessible.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard because, you know, you're like an alpha male type of personality, and you're like, I don't need help.
Yeah.
And then, like, when you think you finally need help, it's like too late.
Right.
And so there's a level of vulnerability that you
Absolutely.
have to be open to.
Absolutely.
You have to find you have to find time and make it important to go talk to somebody about what's really going on, because there's a lot of things. And every time I would go talk to a counselor, I was like I'd war gaming, like, what am I going to say?
I know, yeah. Instead of just being open, we always
Yeah.
have to have a plan going in.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to talk about today? Yes.
Like, how much am I going to open up to this
Absolutely.
person about what's going on in my head? And
Yeah.
it's like, you finally get to the point where you crack the door, or you
Yeah.
open up enough, and you're like, oh my God, that felt so great.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad I let that go.
Yes.
And if you
absolutely.
don't, you leave it and you're frustrated and you're
Yeah.
upset, and you don't get, really you don't get closure on some of those things.
Yeah. I agree. You just got to go. You got to go do it. And if you're out there and you're struggling, just got to initiate movement. That's the hardest
Yeah.
thing. Go in there the first time and try to be vulnerable and build. It's hard. You got to trying to build trust, and you don't know
Yeah.
what to say. But it's super important. I think we've both seen the value in it, because we've
Yeah.
done it, and it's helped us out in all facets of my life. I know it has, right? And it's still a work in progress.
It is, and I don't know. I think there's a big. I think it was a big hurdle in the beginning to get people to know that it's actually good for
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
To do that, and there's still a way to. I mean, I think it's going to be a navigational thing where you have to work through the details, and if you go once, you think you're good, but you're not.
Yeah.
If you don't, you go a lot of times, you may think you're good and you're not.
Absolutely.
It's just, you just got to go through it and deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done that your whole career, your whole life, really, right? With your injuries and the stuff that happens with your kids, you just got to deal with it, right?
You just got to deal with it, yeah.
Got to deal with it. And I will say, since I've known you, you've always been very transparent about if you didn't know something, and you always asked for help when you were a first sergeant and I was running the ops job and you didn't know what's going on. You were like, I don't know what's happening right now. And I think that's a quality that's just super good with you, that you are, and it helps people relax and communicate with you. And I've always enjoyed just working around you, because if you're just honest, right, you don't try to hide whether you don't get it or if you do get it. And I appreciate the heck out of that from you. So this is going to be a hard question for you to answer, in my opinion, because you've been through a lot of hard days in uniform and out of uniform, and leaving service and coming back to service. If you could pinpoint what was that hardest day or that most challenging day that you had in the uniform up to this point?
Well, I think when it comes to physical, I don't think there was a hard day physically in uniform. And I think that goes, it's like saying, for like a track star, what's your hardest run? You're like, I don't know. Like, they're all hard. I make sure of it.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's more like, it's mentally. And I think where the most challenging day, and I say it in uniform because I had to actually say no to a request for me to go to a tryout for a special mission unit, and I couldn't do it, and I knew why, and it was because of my son's was in this process of being diagnosed, and I had to just get this huge, it looked, it's like a portal to another world was opening up for me.
Yeah.
And I had to shut it down and say, I can't do it. And so I was like, wow, I really, after especially all the stuff I've kind of been able to work through, I'm like, well, I've gotten through a part where I can't do this, and I've gotten through a part where I can't do that, and I can't do that. And I'm like, I can do it, and I'll do it, and I did it or whatever. But then I'm at this point and I just couldn't do it. I wasn't able to do it. And think the hard part wasn't specifically that I had to say no to it. It was just like accepting finally that there was something I couldn't do.
Yeah.
And it really bothered me.
Absolutely.
And it had nothing to do with anything, but I think it was like, I think I had like this internal drive or this internal burn to keep, showing up to work and, showing, I don't want to say showing my value because I don't really think of it that way, but showing my, like I care.
Yeah.
And then I felt like someone saw that and they invited me to go do this thing and I couldn't do it. And it just has the timing of it and everything. And I think as I look back at it, I would say, yeah, I could have actually probably done it. Yeah. I could have, and I just I had this. It was a 3-foot wall that I felt that I wasn't ready for, but I probably would have been fine, and I think that it would have worked out, no matter what. And it was just like like the uncertainty of it. And I think that's really probably where a lot of things started for me, where I started questioning.
Oh yeah.
Questioning decisions I was making.
Yeah, that first time you didn't do,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't go beyond the expectations,
Yeah.
of what people had for you. So I think it's interesting. Same with that question. Everybody has a different answer. It's usually not the combat related stuff.
Yeah.
Or it's something about missing their kids or not following through on something, like a hindsight type thing. So everybody, the other hard days, those are just kind of like givens.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it. It's the things that you wish you'd have done different that you could have affected that really seem to, hang with you,
Mm-hmm.
as you go. I'm kind of closing out here. You are like I don't want to get emotional, but anytime I've ever had a bad day, in the last years that I've known you and known kind of your story, I've kind of like, there's no excuse for it, right? Because you always show up. You're always in a great mood, right? You bring a smile to every meeting. You bring a joke to every meeting when it gets bad. You've been given some tough assignments overseas that nobody wanted, and you do it graciously, right? And we've had some, and with everything that's going on with your family, your kids, everything that happened to you, all you've done is serve, man. You've just served. You've served your nation way more than anybody has, in my opinion, more than you had to, and you just did it because you loved it. I super appreciate you coming on here. I'm proud to call you a friend, a fellow New Mexican.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you got any closing words.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do feel that like I owe it to people in a way that doesn't seem fair. That I don't know. You kind of only given one shot in life, and if you just take it, yeah, you gotta take it.
That's right.
And sometimes it's overcoming those really, really hard things, and sometimes it's not that hard. It's just doing it because it's something you like or enjoy and you love. And I've been listening to some of your other episodes and just listening about transitioning and doing all this other stuff, and I'm in this process where I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going.
Yeah.
I'm just going, and I just know that I want to stay. I want to keep focused on, like, I don't know, not being lost, not being so confused about what's going to happen, and having this feeling of like not having a purpose. I talk about doing something because I want to do it, but I probably do a lot of things. I'm not sure why I'm doing it.
Oh, that's the merit. That's the Kanaan I know right there. So, thanks again for coming on. From that guy that that young Ranger medic, fill-in medic that got blown up in 2003 to you just pinned the Sergeant Major star on your chest a couple months back. An amazing feat, right? That you'll never really recognize personally for yourself, but I recognize it and appreciate it. It's an amazing feat. And for all you guys out there listening or watching, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave your comments down below. And Kanaan, we always mess his name up. It's Kanaan. Appreciate you coming on. It's been fun.
Thank you.
We'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's been good. It makes me feel a little bit better. don't really openly talk about a lot of stuff. And so I appreciate you having me on and giving me an opportunity to talk about myself.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.